All right, nice to see everybody. I'm Anna Dimitriades. I'm the Director of Communications and Outreach for Advocates for the West. We are really pleased to have this social distancing hour lineup today. As some of you may know who are attending this webinar right now, we have been working with Conservation Lands Foundation for the past few years, thanks to some great work that Todd has done. Todd being Todd Tucci, one of our senior attorneys at Advocates for the West, really worked hard to build a great relationship with Conservation Lands Foundation and all of their friends groups. It's been a really a wonderful addition to what we do at Advocates for the West as public interest environmental lawyers. So I am going to briefly introduce our panelists, and then I'm going to hand it off to Todd, who is going to take it from there to talk about the work that we do with CLF and other friends groups, including Friends of the Inyo, Conserve Southwest Utah, which are both on this call, and a number of other groups that work on cases that he's going to talk about. So with us today is Danielle Murray, who is the Senior Legal and Policy Director at Conservation Lands Foundation. Tom Butine, who is the board president at Conserve Southwest Utah. And then we have Bryan Hatchell, who is with he's the Desert Lands organizer at Friends of the Inyo, and Jora Fogg, who is the policy director at Friends of the Inyo. So with that, I'm going to take myself off video and hand it over to Todd, and then I will hop back on later for a Q&A session. Oh, and brief primer for attendees, if you would have questions throughout the presentation, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and I will be fielding those questions. So, oops.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Anna. Hello, everybody. It looks like we have about 22 folks on, so we should be anticipating another 15 or 18 that signed up that'll be coming on. My name is Todd Tucci. You probably know me or may know me. I'm the senior attorney here at Advocates for the West. And I am super happy to talk for this social distance happy hour series, because this we get to talk about some of the work that I've been doing with Danielle, Bryan, and others regarding our national public lands, our national monuments, and our national conservation lands. So one of the most enduring and important partnerships for Advocates for the West has been over the past, just going on 4 years, coming up in December, our partnership with Conservation Lands Foundation. And I will let Danielle speak to what Conservation Lands Foundation is. But about 4 years ago, we entered into a relationship where Advocates for the West, which was a change for advocates, because we have always been for 17 years public interest environmental lawyers and litigators for the conservation movement. This was a slight shift for us, because we were not just doing litigation for Conservation Lands Foundation. We were also doing building legal advocacy capacity within Conservation Lands and its friends group. So about 4 years ago, we entered into this relationship, and there's largely three buckets, if you will, of the work that we are providing to Conservation Lands Foundation. One, as many know and have read in any of our updates or quarterly reports, is the work that we're doing for Danielle, for Conservation Lands in the National Monument Defense realm regarding Bears Ears National Monument and Grand Staircase National Monument. We are helping CLF put forth the best case. We are not running that litigation, but we are acting as a client group, which is awfully interesting, because that lets me weigh in on everything but have very little responsibility. So that has been a new and dynamic work for us. We also provide Conservation Lands Foundation with in-house legal counseling services. So we helped CLF stand up a whole bunch of internal policies in order to fully push their 501c3 status and make sure that they're doing everything they can to push back against President Trump, Secretary Bernhardt, and others. And then the third bucket, which I am frankly most excited about, and it's the most fun that I have, is the third bucket is that we work with Conservation Lands, with Danielle and its 80 other friends groups, really standing up a legal advocacy capacity in these friends groups. A lot of these friends groups, and you'll hear from two of them, some of these friends groups started as stewardship groups, and they were doing incredible work building trails, and other kind of stewardship work. And then at the beginning of the Trump administration, I think we all realized that it may be time to stand up a legal advocacy capacity for these groups. And so through that, I have been working with both the groups on this call and others, giving presentations, walking through how to engage in the administrative process, how to engage in the agency decision-making process, how to appeal decisions that you don't like, and then ultimately where this ends up in this day and age is in federal court. So that is the third bucket that we're working on. That's largely what we're all going to be talking about. I am going to, with that heads up or overview, I'm going to hand it off to Danielle to talk about conservation lands, to talk about how she and I work together to kind of push our advocacy agenda. And then I believe Danielle's going to speak briefly on a new case that we're working on together that we brought on behalf of conservation, or that Conservation Lands Foundation brought in the Western Arctic. So without anything else, Danielle, have at it.
Great, thanks, Todd. And so we're on the first slide here, just again to introduce myself, Danielle Murray. I'm the Senior Legal and Policy Director here at the Conservation Lands Foundation. I just look back and I started 2008. So I've been working here for over almost 12 years now. Time is flying through a lot of different administrations also. So you see on this first slide, our mission down at the right, our mission statement, but I thought it was important to talk a little bit about our vision for public lands. I think in this administration, it's really beneficial to think about what the future could hold for our public lands and what's necessary. And also why public lands, there's such a spotlight on them right now, especially those managed by the Bureau of Land Management. We're really in a biodiversity climate change crisis. And with the pandemic, I think people are more and more appreciating our public lands, not just for limited recreational values, but holistically that our public lands are our society's insurance policy. And we really need to think about how important our public lands are for our future here in the United States. So what are national conservation lands? I'm sure most of you on this call know about the different agencies. Bureau of Land Management, the largest land managing agency in the nation, the one that is also under the most scrutiny for oil and gas development, large scale pushbacks by the Trump administration. There is a subset of these BLM lands that are managed for conservation called the National Conservation Lands. Anything that BLM manages that has kind of a conservation overlay to it legislatively, legally, is part of the system. And so national monuments, conservation areas, wilderness study areas. I'm sure you guys have all heard of Grand Staircase and Bears Ears, but there's a lot of other areas out there. And so our mission is really focused on this agency and creating more conservation opportunities within the Bureau of Land Management, expanding the national conservation lands, and hopefully a long-term goal of kind of greening this agency. And we have a lot of work to do, as you all know, in this administration. So kind of what our special sauce is, and I was going to take this out of that last sentence, but our special sauce is really that we are a hybrid organization. We're advocates. Our policy and legal team internally is myself and one other individual. And so we really, our goal is to build kind of this network of friends groups. And a lot of them are, sophisticated, strategic. Some of them have staff larger than ours. Some of them are just an all volunteer organization. It just really depends on the location. Some organizations are really focused on archaeology, history. Some are Indigenous run. It really runs the gamut of the type of organization we support. But each year we give out a little over $1.5 million to these organizations. We provide, networking. We provide access to decision leaders in DC. We really just try to support the friends groups and meet them where they are. Do they need communication support? What do they need? And up until the Trump administration, CLF had never filed litigation And we really didn't support our friends groups in filing litigation either. We were really based on growing grassroots and campaigns, and we were successful in the Obama administration. Once Trump took office, Bernhardt, Zinke, we realized that it was a different game we were playing, and that building campaigns were not going to work all the time, and that we needed to kind of up our legal and litigation strength, and not just ours, not just CLFs. Even through this administration, we've only filed 3 times, but through our friends groups too. And so as Todd talked about, bringing in legal expertise was not just, okay, maybe, you know, CLF will litigate, but what do the friends groups need to defend their local unit from all of these bad land use plans, attacks from the administration? So that's kind of really our hybrid model for success, is really working with this network of friends groups and then bringing in expertise. And I'm going to talk a little bit more on the next slide. And I apologize, there's a lot of information on this slide. It really just shows that, you know, our model is one where we engage from the beginning to the end. This is kind of defensive effort slide. So it just shows, like, right from the beginning of any effort, we're there with kind of funding, whether it's working with the local friends groups, building communications. It's really a long-term campaign effort until a place is securely protected. And in the past, we really didn't need that litigation aspect. But bringing in advocates for the West allows us and the Friends Grassroots Network engage from that really strategic legal capacity at every stage of this approach. And that means that it's not just jumping in at the end to maybe take on a case and litigate, which they are doing for some friends groups, but it's working through every stage of the process of, you know, do we need to file FOIA requests to get information? Are we going to file our scoping comments? What do they need to say to delay this agency to maybe push them to make sure that we can get past the election? I mean, very strategic thinking from a legal aspect at every single stage of a planning process. And this allows this kind of litigation support with this relationship to be available to, you know, 70 plus groups, depending on where the defensive effort is needed. So kind of last slide. Oh, I actually have 2 more. This is just our back end. We do, we track everything in error table. And I use this slide in a different presentation to just show that there's a lot going on right now. We're kind of at the scorched earth phase of the Trump administration. There's a limited time window that Bernhardt and Penley, even though he's not in office anymore, they know that they have a little limited time window. And so they're trying to push through as many plans, large scale plans as they can. And so we're kind of tracking all of these at various levels. And it's a really busy time right now for defense. And I think a lot of people are really consumed with the election and what's going to happen after the election. But we're really in the thick of it right now and trying to make sure that we can kind of hold the line and see if we can have a new administration. If not, we're going to just continue these defensive efforts. So my last slide. This is a little bit of a wonky slide, but I just kind of wanted to show that, you know, our model of kind of building the Friends Grassroots Network is elevated with the relationship with Advocates for the West, because it provides another set of technical resources and outlets for the entire network. You know, and our thing is, you know, instead of us just being one nonprofit, we're trying to kind of more build a movement here and really kind of arm a group of advocates across the West. Again, and I always want to say this, a lot of them are like, they're strategic, they're sophisticated, they're smart, they have their own fundraising development teams. We just help kind of connect them with needed resources where they are. And some of them really, the litigation aspect was like the one thing. They have a really strong comms team and development team. And this was one thing that was needed in this administration to really fight for the landscape that they care about. So by partnering with advocates, we were yet able to kind of elevate this entire network and this entire movement to make sure that as we are trying to move forward to add protected units to the BLM, we're not letting them backslide. We're really holding the line on the national conservation lands. And, yes, this is a bump in the road. It's a huge bump in the road. But under this kind of model, we're able to kind of spread out those lines of defense and support kind of an army of advocates, and instead of just a handful of groups. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom. Yes, Todd, did you want to go ahead?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going, Danielle, thank you very much. That was great. We are now going to hear, and maybe this wasn't my place to jump in, but I've done it, so I'll continue it. We're now going to hear from two of the friends groups who Advocates for the West is helping in different ways for both of these groups fight back some decisions that are coming. So without further ado, Tom Butine is the board chair of Conserve Southwest Utah. I was down in St. George just about a year ago now, if I remember correctly, and Tom wore me out both on our hike in the Red Cliffs, as well as figuring out how we can try to push back against a highway through a national conservation area. So Tom, without further ado, have at it. You got 10 or 12 or 15 minutes, whatever you need.
Thank you. I'll buzz through this as quick as I can. I'm new to all this conservation business. When I moved here to Southwest Utah 10 years ago, I wasn't really involved in conservation at all, other than on the side. I spend a lot of time in the woods and outdoors. So I'm very interested in that respect, but I'm an engineer and a physicist, and really wasn't connected at all to conserving land. Up in Washington, where I lived, there wasn't nearly the craziness that we have here in Utah. So I really wasn't exposed to it. So now I am roped in. I'm going to talk a little bit about Conserve Southwest Utah, just to introduce you to our group, and then jump into a little bit about the Red Cliffs, the Desert Reserve, and the National Conservation Area, and this highway they want to push through it. We were formed in 2006, long before I got here, by a handful, really a handful, like 5 or 6, half a dozen people. Oh, you're bombing through it. We started out as Citizens for Dixie's Future. Kind of a funny name. Dixie is a nickname for this area, established for a cotton mission that got set up by the Mormon Church. And we realized quite a few years ago that Dixie in our name wasn't really the best. A lot of confusion about what we were after, so we changed our name to Conserve Southwest Utah. We were formed in reaction to federal legislation about the public lands around here and the Lake Powell pipeline, which you may have heard of also, another big project that we're fighting. We turned that federal legislation around, and it turned into a major section in the Omnibus Public Lands Management Act of 2009. And that act, which established the National Conservation Lands, also established the Red Cliffs National Conservation Area. We've grown from half a dozen members to 2,000. We get about $30,000 a year now from local donations. We have 4 major areas of focus: public lands, water conservation primarily, air quality and climate, and smart growth policies that help conserve all of those things. My interest started out many years ago in climate. I guess from my physics background, mainly, it was kind of an interesting thing to push. So I'm still very interested in climate, which is kind of driving a lot of issues on public lands and in water in the West. But we're mostly focused, I'd say now, on public lands and water. We're trying to get into smart growth more, and I'm still pushing climate stuff on the side. We've got 7 board members. They're all volunteers, 1 staff person. Some of you may have met her at the rendezvous last year, Sarah Thomas. She's a terrific young woman that's just doing a great job on the Red Cliffs. So Washington County, you see it down there in the lower left. It's got a population of 180,000 now. Half of that population is in the city of St. George. quarter of the people are under 18, a quarter over 65. That includes me. It's about 24,000 square feet. We are very white. I like to say we've got every shade of white here in Washington County. We also have a small population, home of the Shibwitz Band of Paiutes, who we've been working hard with, establishing a relationship with a connection to the public lands. There's a low cost of living here. There's low income here that matches it. We've got a lot of really rugged terrain, a lot of red Navajo sandstone. We're right at the intersection of the Mojave Desert, the Colorado Plateau, and the Great Basin, which means a lot of variable species here. A lot of special species, I should say. It's a really tough area for conservation of the environment. 2/3 of the county is federally managed. We've got a high growth rate pushing on that, which is why this highway's become an issue, really. We've been in the top 5 in the country, growth-wise for percentage, for probably 30 years. We've been #1 a few times, so it's growing like crazy. It's very conservative, although with yahoos like me moving here, it's getting less so, but still the whole political environment is very conservative. And we have on top of that the Utah attitude, like, this land is our land. What are the feds doing here? And we people in authority don't question us. We know best, follow us. So that's a lot of the attitude that we're bucking. Here's another blow up of Washington County. And you see where the red cliffs are. You see St. George and Washington City and Santa Clara and Ivins around that circle there that I inserted. That's kind of the main metropolitan area. It goes up to Laverton and Leeds and out to Hurricane. That's where most of the population is in the whole county. And the Red Cliffs National Conservation Area is the northern border of this booming population area. And it's squeezed in between a national forest. You see Zion over there to the east. So that's kind of the layout of the county. This next map on the next page is a bit of a blow up of the National Conservation Area. It's a bit of an odd shaped thing, you see. And you can see on the lower part of this where all the growth is, the city's grown right up, literally right up to the very edge of the National Conservation Area. I happen to live right on the very border of the National Conservation Area, kind of right on the edge of Ivins. You see, I don't know if you see it up there, but my daily bike ride and daily hikes are in the National Conservation Area. It's a terrific spot. I'll show you a few pictures of it. Here's kind of the type of expanse that they want to put the highway across. That mountain in the background's a 10,000 footer. It's snowed all winter, and we have these just rugged outcroppings of sandstone all over the place. Lots of deep washes, very difficult to walk across. Here's kind of my backyard. Next one. Here's my wife and I hiking in one of the terrific spots. Just, the trailhead's maybe 2 miles away from our house. A lot of scrambling, very rugged, just beautiful. They couldn't put a highway through that area. It's too rough. Here's another section of it, kind of the disjointed section. That's okay. Here's one of our terrific supporters, Freddie from Backcountry Horseman. She goes out riding in this stuff all the time. So there's parts of it that are, very deserty like this and sandy, and some of it that's really rugged cliffs. Another shot of it. So I'll tell you a little bit about the Desert Reserve and the National Conservation Area and the highway. In the early 1990s, the county, as it noticed it was growing a lot, started hatching this typical concept of having a ring road around the metro area. And at that same time, the Mojave Desert Tortoise was being considered as a threatened species. And there are several other species in that same category, mostly plant species. In '95, the little rascal got listed as threatened. The county and the Fish and Wildlife Service and the BLM agreed on a habitat conservation plan to enable development throughout the county in this tortoise habitat and still allow protection of it. Otherwise, we would have stopped all development in the county because tortoises were hanging out where people wanted to build houses. The Red Cliffs Desert Reserve was established as part of that HCP to protect the habitat and to relocate from other places in the county, relocate tortoises. It's also, as I've kind of been mentioning, a major recreation area. Hiking, terrific climbing, lots of birds, mountain biking, horseback riding, and it's a terrific spot for artists. In 2006, the Public Lands Bill, the Omnibus Public Lands Management Act, came into play. And, oh, that's when, I'm sorry, I'm out of sync here. That was the bill that was being proposed. And Utah stuck in that bill the authorization of this northern corridor right through the land not 10 years ago they agreed to protect. We fought against it, CSU did, and won. And at the same time, we came up with we helped establish and get money for a visioning exercise that came up with principles for how we should grow in the county and protect our property. Huge participation of the citizens and the elected officials too. However, the elected officials never implemented it. 2009 is when Optima came in, established the NCA, and established BLM's mandate beyond just multiple use into conservation. Red Cliffs is 45,000 acres. It's an overlay on top of what was preserved through the HCP as the Desert Reserve. And that act also authorized, this has been a sticking point, the study of possible northern corridor routes in the county. The county government has always interpreted that as in the NCA, and that's where the battles come. 2013, we started getting in cahoots with CLF in a big way, huge help to us. We were struggling. In 2015, the Red Cliffs NCA Resource Management Plan came out, and it disallowed the highway through the NCA, as it should have. Really pissed the county off. They appealed it, they lost, and they started coming back through congressional action in 2018 and 2019, a bill in the House and another in the Senate. And we, with the help of CLF and a few of our other partners, went back to DC a couple times and beat those bills back, basically got allies in both the Senate and the House that, hey, this highway wasn't a good idea. So they died. They're still trying. Next page. Oh, a little bit more, I guess. Oh, what we're into now, right in the middle of now, is a NEPA process that started with scoping late last year, is into draft environmental impact statement this year, and final environmental impact statement late this year. It's likely the Northern Corridor Highway is going to be approved. A lawsuit is likely the only remedy to that. And in comes advocates riding to the rescue. So the problem that the Northern Corridor Highway is trying to solve is a lot of traffic congestion around here, anticipated within 20 years. We're continuing to grow like nuts for the next 20 years, and traffic's going to grow with it. The cause of this traffic problem is, it's really, I keep saying, it's a self-inflicted wound. Years of poor growth and traffic management, not poor growth, too much growth, poor management of the growth. And this Utah value and attitude. They were basically counting on being able to force the highway, so they allowed all the land to be developed all along the northern edge of the metro area. So it's really difficult to relieve traffic going east to west along the north part of the metro area without going into the NCA. So the issues are, well, there are alternatives. The DEIS, the Draft Environmental Impact Statement, shows alternatives inside the National Conservation Area have huge environmental impacts to habitat, to recreation, to home values of houses that are built right up to the edge of it, and we're counting on that being open land. Quality of life in general, just the visual aspect, the noise aspect, also those impact to businesses, huge recreation business that relies on that land. And not to mention, of course, the legal issues. The DEIS also shows that alternatives outside the NCA, those are alternatives that we forwarded, do a better job at solving the traffic and have none of the impacts that the inside the NCA alternatives do. But of course, the local elected officials don't like those solutions outside the NCA. They'd rather bulldoze through undisturbed land than put some improvements on existing roads. So there's several issues with the law. Our comments nailed these out pretty well. These will be the foundation of any legal action that we have to take, and Todd's on top of these. So there's 4 acts that we'll push on. And of course, through this whole time, the tortoise isn't doing so hot. It's been declining through all this period because of this continued pressure. And we've had some fires recently this summer that have really knocked the tortoise population down. And the county's ethical position continues to amaze me. They're engaging in lots of unethical action. Here's some pictures of a Mojave Desert Tortoise. They live about as old as we do. They can live to over 100. Here's a little guy on the right. We have one of these that we've adopted. He can't be put back in the wild because he has a respiratory disease that is contagious. And so we are taking care of him. He's about that size. It fits in the palm of your hand. He's about 6 or 7, I think. There's a terrific guy, about 60 years old. I guess they can tell how old they are by looking at the plates on their underside. A little bit more about the highway. So we've stopped this highway now 6 times in the past 14 years. This is the 7th attempt. They're going through NEPA, which I already mentioned. Scoping was late last year. We had 17,000 letters submitted from the public that the BLM got just during scoping. Our coalition, we've got 19 different conservation organizations with huge participation by CLF, and through them with advocates. We submitted 357 substantive comments. The draft EIS was posted in June. We, the coalition and our members, submitted 15,000 comment letters on the draft EIS, huge. Our coalition has 403 individual substantive issues. We looked back and found out that only 8% of our scoping comments were adequately addressed in the draft environmental impact statement, and 61% of them were not addressed at all. We're pressing for a supplemental DEIS on several fronts. They're going to resist a supplemental because that'll push it past Inauguration Day, which, if we're lucky, will get us a new administration, which will put a stop to this nonsense. But we don't think they will stop at anything for getting a record of decision out on January 13th. Current status, there's a letter that came out of the House Natural Resources Committee on the Land and Water Conservation Fund that was used to purchase some of the properties in the National Conservation Area that the highway routes right through, illegal. A few other issues were brought up in that letter too, so they asked the Department of Interior to stop. We're pushing for supplemental DEIS on several fronts. We've got lots of press. Political pressure is building through Congress. The county's pushing their economic hardship story. We're expecting the ROD to go against us. And I can't remember what the last bullet is, but I think it's we're expecting to have to go into a lawsuit, and we're hoping we don't have to press for an injunction. We're a little worried they might start blading the highway as soon as they get permission to do so. Here's a quick chart on the alternatives. You see the three broad ones that are inside the NCA. There's the two outside the NCA you can hardly see. One's a blue one that the blue arrows are pointing to, and the other's a one-way couplet in downtown St. George. The blue one's just improving an existing highway through the NCA. There's the impact on the Land and Water Conservation Fund purchases. Those purchases are the red hatchings, and this kind of pinkish extended area is an impact zone from a highway on that land.
Hey, Tom, let me interrupt for a moment. You got about 1 minute.
I'm about
wrap
done.
This baby up.
Yep.
So
In fact, you could say I'm done. I think this is about the last slide. Those dark blue splotches show the highest density tortoise populations, and you can see the lower one there. The routes the county's trying to press goes right through them.
All right, we will have some questions, I suspect, at the end. That was great, Tom. Thank you very much. Tom says that advocates rode to the rescue in the end, but he may be forgetting that we were there in 2016, pushing back against the county's original effort to, not original, but 2016 era effort to put the highway through. So we have been, this is one of our longest standing and most treasured relationships. And this is been treasured for advocates and for me personally, because we saw a project out on the future coming down. The clients, Conserve Southwest Utah and CLF, did not only rely on litigation as their only strategy here. They have a full-on public policy campaign, of which litigation and administrative advocacy is one angle, but they are playing the press and the legislative angle as good as I've seen in a very long time. So it's really great. And now I see that Wendy Schneider has joined us, so the big guns are here. So I should probably be quiet and give a very brief introduction to Wendy, who's Executive Director of Friends of the Inyo. I believe Bryan is here, who's the desert organizer. And Jora is also here, I believe. And I have no doubt that they want to speak for a long time, especially Jora, because she is just wrapping up a sabbatical where she's coming back ready, fired up, and ready to kick some ass. And so with that, I will hand it off to either Wendy, Jora, or Bryan. I don't know who's giving the presentation, but have at it.
Well, I'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to talk a little bit about the organization, and then I'm going to turn it over to Bryan, and who might also engage Jora to talk about our campaign to protect Conglomerate Mesa. And that was a really great presentation, Tom, and thank you for sharing that story with us, and keep up the good work. You're fighting the good fight there. And I wish we had some pictures of something as adorable as those tortoises, but, and I can't control the slides, so I don't know if I should just say next slide when I'm ready, but hopefully, oh, I see down here, okay.
Yes, you can just say next slide, Wendy. We've got it.
Thanks. Okay, so we are Friends of the Inyo, and we have actually been around since 1986. We were formed to engage in the penultimate. We just had one finish up last year, but the one before that, revisions to the management plan for the Inyo National Forest. And the group was just a bunch of volunteers that got together just for the purpose of trying to achieve conservation goals in that that last set of revisions. And but it turned out that there was a lot of engagement in favor of conservation goals to be carried out in the Eastern Sierra over the years, and the group has just never disbanded. So at this point, Friends of the Inyo is a misnomer, in the sense that we don't work just on the Inyo National Forest. We work on 3 national forests, and we also work on both of the BLM field offices that are in the Eastern Sierra. So our working area is quite vast. It stretches all the way from Lone Pine in the south and all the way up to Bridgeport in the north. It bumps up against the eastern edge of Yosemite and includes a lot of desert lands, in addition to a lot of high alpine terrain. So we have a lot of different ecosystems we protect, and in a large area. It crosses 2 counties, both Inyo County and Mono County. And I definitely recognized some of the challenges that Tom mentioned definitely come up for us, especially in Inyo County, which is politically very conservative and not always very supportive of efforts to, do things to protect the environment. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so our mission is to protect and care for the lands of what we like to call Payahunadu, which is more commonly referred these days as the California's Eastern Sierra. And we protect and care for these lands with a number of different programs. And most similar to the work that Tom was describing is we have a really big policy program. And our policy work, for our policy work, we engage with the federal agencies, both BLM and Forest Service, and also right now LADWP, when they are trying to do things on our public lands. And in one campaign that we are focusing a lot on right now is down in southern Inyo County. Conglomerate Mesa, which Bryan is going to be talking about more, faces threat of development of a gold mine. And we have another gold mine threat, which is way up in northern Mono County in an area called the Bodie Hills. And in both of these cases, we are not only fighting the imminent threat of exploration and development of these mines, but we're also seeking permanent protection so that hopefully we don't find ourselves in this situation again. And in both of these areas have come under mining threat multiple times in the last decade. Unfortunately, there is gold in both of these places, and the price of gold is high, and the mining companies are coming after it right now. Some of our other policy campaigns that we're working on right now include protection of a pristine canyon in the Mammoth Lakes area, Solitude Canyon. The folks in the town would like to build a new trail there in this undeveloped canyon, which was studied 30 years ago for development of a ski resort. And we know that it's critical to wildlife as a result of those studies. It is an inventoried roadless area, and it is one of the last undeveloped canyons in the Eastern Sierra, period. And we are fighting to protect that. So that's another example. Another example of a policy campaign, and this picture was taken from our Keep Long Valley Green campaign. And in that campaign, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power has threatened to stop allowing irrigation in southern Mono County, and a wetland meadow has arisen there that supports a ranching industry as well as bi-state sage grouse and recreational opportunities. And so we have come together with a diverse coalition to fight LADWP's efforts to stop allowing water there. And in addition to those campaigns, we are also engaged right now in helping to come up with science-based conservation-focused management plans. One of them in the new Alabama Hills National Scenic Area, which is down in southern Inyo County, and another one up in Mono County, the new Owens River Headwaters Wild and Scenic Area. So that's an example sort of right now. Those are the main policy issues that we're working on. Okay, so Conglomerate Mesa. So this is the big one. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Bryan, and then depending on how much time we have left, I might be able to talk about some of our other non-policy programs.
Great. Thank you very much, Wendy. And Tom, awesome presentation. I've opted to do the pretty picture route and bold letters route rather than more detail. So that's an opportunity for you to follow up with Friends of the Inyo after if we happen to miss something you may want to know. But like Wendy said, Conglomerate Mesa in the Eastern Sierra, it's often referred to or was referred to as Payahunadu, which means the place of flowing water. And that is a Paiute word that was used for this area for quite some time, and and still is today. And the Eastern Sierra is specifically home to the Paiute Shoshone Indians and Native Americans, and the Timbisha Shoshone Native Americans. And Conglomerate Mesa actually falls in a unique kind of blending of ancestral territory, ancestral homeland for both of these tribes. It was kind of a transition point for the Timbisha Shoshone leading up out of Death Valley and into the Inyo Mountains. And then the Paiute Shoshone, who are in the Owens Valley, or Payahunadu, kind of made it up into the Inyo Mountains east a little bit and would meet, and those borders would mesh. I'll show you here just a little bit of a map so we can get a better idea of where exactly we're talking about. Again, Conglomerate Mesa is it's BLM land managed specifically by the Ridgecrest Field Office, and like Wendy mentioned, we work within both the Ridgecrest office and the Bishop Field Office. And Conglomerate Mesa is public land. It's national conservation land with ACEC, Area of Critical Environmental Concern here, specifically for some of the rare plant life. For all intents and purposes, you know, Conglomerate Mesa, it's designated for conservation and is supposed to be managed that way, though we are seeing some recent developments that challenge the conservation provisions of conservation lands. And that's you know, a big reason why Friends of the Inyo and Advocates for the West and CLF work so closely together and pull our collective brain power. And you know, looking at this map here, you'll see, you know, Conglomerate Mesa is practically a mile from the border of the Death Valley National Park and the Death Valley Wilderness, and it is directly adjacent, bumping up against the Malpine Mesa Wilderness area and the Inyo Mountains Wilderness. I'm sure if you all have done some exploring in the California desert, you may know the Cerro Gordo ghost town. Recently had an unfortunate fire there, not in the fire season, it was an isolated event. But many folks are familiar with that area and love it. And actually, if you climb Cerro Gordo Peak, you can look down and see Conglomerate Mesa. If you climb Mount Whitney, the highest peak in the contiguous 48 states, you can look down and see Conglomerate Mesa. Or say you're on your way to Death Valley National Park from Payahunadu, riding down Highway 136 and onto 190. The moment you hit Saline Valley Road, which you'll see bumps up against Malpine Mesa Wilderness, yeah, you can see Conglomerate Mesa. It's a bit of a tuck away spot. It's not the most popular area, which I kind of enjoy. I think anyone who likes finding solitude likes their tuck away spots. But you know, recently it started to get a bit more attention because of some gold exploration activities and mineral development proposals. And specifically, what we're looking at is gold, and there is a new company from Vancouver, Canada called K2 Gold that wants to explore Conglomerate Mesa for its gold prospects. There's been on and off interest in mining at Conglomerate Mesa, again, national conservation lands, for about 3 decades. You know, in the late 80s, early 90s is when we first started to see interest from some of the big mining companies that many of us know, like BHP. And in the late 90s, BHP actually built a road into Conglomerate Mesa and did a fair number of exploratory drill sites. All of that has since been restored, and for all intents and purposes, for the BLM's records, for how we talk about Conglomerate Mesa, it's a roadless area. And it has been proposed for wilderness a number of times in the past. That just kind of gives you an idea of some of the values here. It's, you know, covered in plant life, the iconic Joshua tree, the Inyo rock daisy. It's a strain of Peridili inyoensis. If you're familiar with specific plants, it has immense cultural significance for the local Native American tribes. And there's also a rich mining history here too, evidenced by some charcoaling activity where folks would build miniature charcoal kilns, not like the big ones you see in Death Valley. I kind of joke that they're mom and pop charcoal operations from the 1800s, and we're likely just a team of 2 to 4 out there who would cut down the junipers and the piñons, burn them up into charcoal, and then take it north to Cerro Gordo, where I'm sure many of you know they had the Cerro Gordo silver mines. And they would melt down, you know, or they would mine out silver and ship it up to LA. And, you know, Cerro Gordo played a big part in financing the city of LA and its construction. But to bump us back, and we can go to the next slide if you don't mind, you know, to bump us back to the threat and this company I mentioned, K2 Gold. They want to reopen that old road I mentioned that BHP put there in the 90s. It's roughly, I would say 4 to 6, maybe 7 miles, depending on you know, how you perceive the restoration to have been and how far back it goes. But 4 to 7 miles of brand new road, because again, it's a restorative roadless area. and not only do a first set of 16 drill holes, but they have a new plan for 120 drill holes. And so advocates, Conservation Lands Foundation, and Friends of the Inyo have been working hard to review the legality of this proposal, how it fits in or doesn't fit in with conservation land provisions and ACEC conservation provisions. And in addition to that work, there's local grassroots organizing going on. That's where Friends of the Inyo kind of really the rubber hits the road with us. We're out on the street talking to people about this, engaging businesses, and making sure that K2 Gold, Inyo County, Department of Interior at large understand that folks really do want to see this place protected for conservation. And what we're seeing right now, evidence through K2 Gold's activity, is contrary to those protected designations and the local community's wishes. And we're also working at the federal level too with our state senators to really send that strong message that this place deserves to be protected. And this gold exploration activity that K2 Gold wants to do, they can't piecemeal it together. They can't follow just a couple drill holes here through an EA, a couple drill holes here through a CADX or whatever else. They need to review all of their projected plans and a comprehensive environmental impact statement. So I will stop there. I'm sure we're bumping up against the end of our time slot and pass the mic to Todd, but feel free to ping me with questions that you may have. And thanks again for having us on today.
Well, before I take it back, let's say, Jora, do you have anything you want to add there? You are a valuable partner here, and anything you want to add before we open it up to questions?
I think Bryan covered it really well. We're very thankful to Advocates for the West and CLF for their partnership work on this campaign. I think most of the attendees probably know what a powerhouse Advocates is. And so I just wanted to make a special thank you for that.
Yeah, and I'd like to jump in and just say a few things about Advocates for the West and where they have helped us in this process. So this Conglomerate Mesa mining thread, I've been ED for almost 4 years, was kind of coming up when I first started, and we were able to access the resources of Advocates for the West through CLF to help us engage in the most effective way, help us put the things in our comment letter that needed to be there, to position us to be able to take steps later on should things go badly, helped us form a coalition, and also filed for us an administrative appeal, when the first decision came out. And as things stand now, the company has to use a helicopter to access the site. One company left, now another one is back, and Todd is continuing to help us, position ourselves and engage in the most effective way possible, so that in the likely event that we're going to be filing litigation to prevent an actual mine from developing, that we will be in as strong a position as possible. And they've also been helpful to us on the Solitude Canyon matter, again, consulting with us so that we could put together the strongest possible comment letter, make all of the arguments, say all the things we need to say, and understand what our options are going to be moving through this process so that we can, do the best job that we can to protect that area.
So that is very kind. Thank you. I know we have a couple questions. Let me just say for all the attendees that this and our relationship with Friends of the Inyo is another perfect example of an organization that uses administrative advocacy and litigation as a tool, but not as the ends. We are a means to an end, and it is edifying for me to work with groups that are putting together full-on public policy campaigns. For example, Bryan, Wendy, and Jora just today, I believe, secured a letter of opposition from Senator Feinstein to this K2 Gold expansion. So they're not throwing everything in litigation. Litigation is one of the angles that we're using to try to protect these treasured public lands. So thank you for that. I know there's a whole bunch of questions. Anna, have at it.
All right, thanks you guys. So the first question that popped up here is from Don Mansfield in Idaho. Hi, Don. And he asks, related to the role of CLF in preventing biodiversity loss and your networking function, is CLF or CSU or other groups here working with Center of Biological Diversity or other organizations in the 30 by 30 initiative?
Danielle,
Yes.
you want to take?
Yes, we are. I mean, 30 by 30 is a driving factor for a lot of national organizations right now, and it's how we have organized a lot of the kind of transition and higher level plans, say in a new administration. It's also, we're trying to educate people, and 30 by 30 is one way to educate people between the connection between public lands and climate change and just how important that connection is. So yes, we are working on those larger campaigns. We're working with some national partners to develop a what we're calling a public lands climate map. So hopefully with a conservation science partners, every single acre of BLM and Forest Service lands, you will be able to toggle and figure out the exact climate change metrics important to that subset of land. So you could say, friends of the Inyo, let's look at Conglomerate Mesa. What is the sequestration, biodiversity factors, all of these other factors, and that will be a public available map. So that's just one example of the work we're doing on the 30 by 30 initiative with like the Wilderness Society and Audubon and others. But yes, very much engaged in that. We see that, I mean, it's an existential crisis of climate and biodiversity change, and it's not going away. And so it is a challenge and opportunity for us to advance conservation and large landscape conservation. So thank you for that question.
Thanks, Danielle. Anybody else want to take a stab at that one, or should I continue on? We have a few coming in here, so I'm actually just gonna
I would just say, Don, I would just say, Don, as our as an expert for advocates for the West in cases regarding botany, you'll be happy to know that some of the angles that we're taking on the Conglomerate Mesa have to do with native vegetation that are found only in and around Conglomerate Mesa, and the impacts of gold mine exploration on these endemic native plants is a central legal issue that we intend to raise, in addition to, of course, the iconic Joshua tree. Thanks for your question.
Yeah, thanks for adding that, Todd. So Tony in Idaho asked about the 1872 General Mining Act. Thanks for that question, Tony. He says, is there no hope of ever modernizing the 1872 General Mining Act? It seems to be at the center of all these mining threats, and conservationists are going from fight to fight. Is there a long-term strategy? And Jora, I know you said you wanted to take that one, so go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. It's a question that comes out a lot. No pun intended. We're often between a rock and a hard place when it comes to the Mining Act. So there has been at the end of, or about this time last year, Grijalva, the chair of the Natural Resources Committee, worked on some legislation. It was HR 2579, I believe, the Hard Rock Leasing and Reclamation Act. So there is that, unfortunately, passed out of committee in the House, but given our situation with the Senate right now, hasn't moved. But this would basically modernize the Mining Act to create a leasing system, basically. I'm going to leave it at that because it's a pretty complex law to go at, but there's been several attempts at modernizing the Mining Act, and I think this is our best, most current bill in order to do that.
Thanks, Jora. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say about the 1872 mining law? It's a tough one. Thanks, Tony. So Mary asks, does the Pendley ouster affect any decisions made so far in the Northern Corridor and or Conglomerate Mesa?
I'll take a run at this, but others should feel free to weigh in. So I'll spend 30 seconds. This past Friday found that Pendley, the head of the BLM, is sitting in his position unlawfully and has removed him as the acting head of the BLM. And so the question is are any of the decisions at issue in Red Cliffs or Conglomerate Mesa subject to or complicated by that ouster? And my answer is twofold. One, we don't have any final decisions yet on either of those. And so they don't present a perfect case for testing the boundaries of the inappropriateness of Acting Director Pendley's engagement. So I'm not sure that it's super relevant for the Red Cliffs and Conglomerate Mesa, but there are decisions that he is engaged in on some level on cases that we're working on with CLF on behalf of some friends groups that may be impacted. The truth of the matter is we don't actually know yet, because it's so new, exactly how far to push this, both politically and legally. But there are options out there for us, and we're going to be exploring that over the interim, I would say, 7 to 10 days to really figure out legally where should we take this, and then frankly politically where should we take it, because there will be a pushback. It might be, for example, Mary, you play this game far better than I do, it may be that we get our ducks in a row but then don't launch until after the election or after January 21st, depending on how the election turns out. It would seem to me politically naive to raise something now that they could fix. And so maybe we just start thinking about this and keep it in our back pocket for a time to deploy it when there are less political ramifications and less ability for the current administration to fix it. But other folks may have better ideas.
I think Todd covered the I don't know aspect of it yet, but I will say CLF has gone through and has a list of all final agency decisions made in the past 424 days, and then those with some sort of subsequent interim decisions. Because as you said, whether it's legally advantageous to move forward now to sit on that and or use it politically to say, listen, this administration was operating under a false pretense and these are not decisions that were made ethically. And so we need to look at all of them. So I think we're figuring out the best strategy moving forward, but it is helpful in a lot of our efforts.
I would just add too that Penley was appointed, I believe, in July of 2017, 2018, but we had a decision for the first phase of Conglomerate Mesa before he was appointed. So you have to look at the range of dates of when he's been director to determine what projects would fall.
Yeah.
All right, thank you all for that. And we're a little over time, but I do have one last question that came in, so I'm going to punt this to you guys. And John and Paula ask, how will concerns about rare earth minerals impact our work? Anybody want to? I'm guessing there might be some concerns there with Conglomerate Mesa, or there may be other mines that might want to weigh in on that. Does anybody want to talk about what concerns we might have about rare earth mineral demand with these mines?
So the groups here, rare earth minerals is not an impact these decisions at issue, but CLF has a very robust California program and a very robust friends network in California and elsewhere, so that if these decisions start bubbling up, I anticipate that they will land on Danielle's desk and my desk before too long. So right now, they haven't been brought to my attention. I don't know if they have been to Danielle's, but from the CLF perspective, they have a really robust California office as well as office around Nevada and other states. And if these issues raise, we'll tackle them when we can. But I'm not aware of any deep conversations about that issue.
Yeah.
Strategic minerals, for sure, right? So this list of minerals like lithium that we need for batteries, and that's one of the other mines that we're fighting. And I know we're wrapping this up, so I'll be brief, but we're working on exploration proposals very near Conglomerate Mesa in a place called Panamint Valley, which is adjacent to Death Valley National Park. And they're interested in exploring for lithium there. And that's much more of a trickier issue to navigate in the public and in media because we all use lithium and we need it. And, perhaps we shouldn't be getting it from the far reaches of the world, right?
Thanks, Jora. I want to go ahead and wrap this up then and say thank you all so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate this. This was a great presentation and we're so happy to be working with you all, and we're happy to have all of our attendees on. If anybody would like a recording of this session, I will distribute it once we have it processed and cut and ready for distribution. We'll have it on our Advocates for the West YouTube channel, and we'll have that on our website as well. Thank you again very much. And thanks to Madeline Donfro, our operations manager, for running the slideshow today. And I just want to give a brief reminder that all of this work is made possible thanks to our supporters. So all of you out there who support our work, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. And we're here to fight for you. So thanks a lot. And thank you all for making this presentation happen. We'll see you again next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, y'all. Bye-bye.